Hey everybody, this is Bill Varney from FishTheSurf.com and SurfFishTackle.com with your Friday, May 8th surf fishing report. So check it out. I'm coming from my new studio here that I'm working on. Knowing me, it'll probably be a month or two before it's finished. But here we are today, so it's great. So let's jump right into the current conditions. You know, last week surf fishing really slowed down, and really the reason for that was we had this outside wind that came in and turned the water over. We had a little bit of rain associated with that. It looks like most of that's behind us. Doesn't mean we won't have maybe a little splash here and there, another rainstorm between now and when they're over for the summer, but pretty much a lot of that is over now, so that's a really good sign. So water temperatures went down to as low as 55 degrees up in Santa Barbara. It's recovered over the last couple of days, 57 today, 64 down in San Diego. You can really see the difference in the wind, how it was blowing up by Point Conception, turned the water over, and then you get down to San Diego, didn't change the water temperature really at all. So look for that to come back, and one of the main reasons it's going to come back is our swells. We currently have just a slight swell out of the south and a slight swell out of the northwest. We're going to see that over the weekend with some really small surf on most beaches. And then that will begin to pick up early next week on, for example, on Monday of next week, we're going to see a south swell from, once again, way down in the South Pacific. These three storms we have upcoming from down there are originating right off the ice in Antarctica and making their way 6,000 miles into Southern California. So we'll begin to see that early next week. No big surf to speak of, probably about waist high, maybe chest high at the standout spots on south-facing beaches. And then on west-facing beaches, you're going to once again have that flat to waist-high surf, maybe a little bit bigger from a wind swell as we get into next week, as we're going to have a little bit of wind again. So that's the swells, and then also from the swell world, over the next, I'd say 3 weeks or so at least, we can see out of what's going on down in the South Pacific, and there are once again a series of 3 storms down there that will continue to push that warm water up into Southern California. So that's a really good sign. That means that when we have this little bit of a turnover with the wind, which is good because it mixes up the nutrients, that will be mitigated very quickly by this warmer water temperature coming back up from that surf coming up from the south. So really good sign there. I wouldn't be surprised once again if we're getting near 70 degrees water temperature when we're in the month of June. So that is a great sign. Tide-wise, we're getting out of these neap tides, which we've had over the last week or so, very small tidal changes from low to high tide. You'll even notice on some of those days there was 2 or even 1 tidal change during the entire day instead of 3 or 4 like we would normally see. So we're coming out of that, and the reason that we're coming out of it in this upcoming week, still a bit neap over the weekend, and then bigger tidal changes, certainly Monday through about 10-day period there. As we get closer to the new moon, that's going to come up here next Friday on the 18th, I believe it is when that new moon's going to come into effect, on the 16th. In that meantime, we're going to have some great tidal movement, and then as we get to next Friday, a week from today, we're going to see that next grunion run as those grunion fill in on that new moon period and spread out along the beach, and of course bring that halibut, white sea bass, all of those fish closer to shore. And you're going to see that anywhere from Point Conception all the way down, of course, below the Mexican border there. Those grunion are going to have a big effect on the fish next week. So look for some really good halibut fishing coming up in about a week to 2 weeks from now as those grunion fill in and they come in close to feed on those. And then wind-wise, you know, today, tomorrow, into next week, we're going to have our traditional side shore on south-facing beaches, offshore, light offshore winds on west-facing beaches in the mornings, and then that's going to be filled in the afternoon with northwest winds of about 8 to 15 knots in the afternoon. The exception to that will be beginning early next week, like on Monday, for example. We're going to see winds in the afternoon at places like Isla Vista North, all the way up past Point Conception, up to 40 knots in the afternoon. So that means, once again, it's really possible that we're going to see a turnover of the water that will happen in those afternoons up in that Santa Barbara area. But once again, below that, very little wind effect on the water because most of that wind is well offshore once it gets around Point Conception there. So really good conditions coming up. And then remember, I want to remind you again about that grunion run is coming up a week from today on the 16th, Friday the 16th. And that should be hopefully a good grunion run, but really keep in mind it's observation only until we get to the 1st of July. So can't take any, can't collect any of them, but you certainly can see where they come into shore and go back there and fish later for all those fish that are following close to shore. Once again, the secret on these grunion runs is not that the grunion are running, but where did they come in, and I want to fish the edges of where they came in. That's the most important thing to find out, is where those grunion came into shore. So let's jump into the surf fishing report as we make our way up to Santa Barbara. Remember, we had that water turnover, we had cooler water water went down by like 9 degrees. It's obviously coming back now. And also associated with that wind was a lot of eelgrass and kelp in the water. So it definitely slowed down fishing in Santa Barbara. One of the bright spots continues to be halibut fishing there. And when we're looking at places like Butterfly Beach, East Beach, near the wharf, even up by Ledbetter, those areas have remained good for halibut fishing. Also up in that Moore Mesa and Goleta area, both of those areas are protected by points that go out and reduce that turnover of water up in that area. So for the time being up in Santa Barbara, you want to concentrate on areas that are inside of points where there's not as much of a turnover in water, because that's where those halibut are going to come in to feed. And of course, there'll be a lot of them close to shore as we get up around next Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, a week from today with that grunion run up there. That'll also hopefully bring in some more white sea bass. And on the white sea bass subject, there was many less white sea bass caught in the last week up there. I know conditions had something to do with that, and all those fish were sublegal fish. Hopefully that will improve with this upcoming grunion run, but with less food in the water near shore and that turnover of water, makes a lot of sense that it wasn't quite as good. Perch fishing up there has remained really good. Once again, we're seeing anglers catch all of these like 5 to maybe 10-inch perch, whereas we go back a couple of months ago, we got these 13, 14, maybe even 15 inchers up there. And that's because of a couple reasons. We talked about this last week. One is, you know, a lot of that spawn is over now, so those big females are not coming in so close to shore. But beyond that, there are trillions of these little tiny perch, these 3, 4, 5-inch perch. They're voracious, they're so hungry. So anything that comes into the water, they're going to go attack it first. And often there's the mom and pop on the outside, but they can't even get close to your bait because all these little fish are there. So look for that to continue throughout the summer. Those fish will begin to get bigger and bigger. Then we get back into fall, we get back into that second spawn of the year, and those big females come out, the males come out, and that's when you can find those bigger fish in the fall time. So look for, over the summer, continues to be good along the whole Santa Barbara stretch, but the smaller fish for now. And then some really good news coming out of La Conchita. Anglers are seeing a lot of corbina in that area, so that's really good. They're seeing sand crabs in the sand there, and it's been good along that stretch for some nice sized perch around there. And anglers are using both, you know, flies for those perch and live bait like mussels, lugworms, dried lugworms, bloodworms, ghost shrimp. All of that stuff has worked in that La Conchita area for perch up there. And some of the perch have been still bigger in that area, up to 14 inches reported to me this week. So that's a really good sign. And then as we make our way down to Ventura, you know, Ventura continues, for whatever reason it is, to be the epicenter for corbina fishing. And anglers fishing, once again, with the exotics, the ghost shrimp, the bloodworms, and then also the surf fly, the sand crab fly, presented either on the Carolina rig or on a fly fishing rig, have worked really, really well in the surf, with once again like another dozen corbina, not real big ones this week. They're all kind of around that, I would say 16 to 20 inch range, but really good corbina fishing remains on Ventura beaches. And that's really from, I would say, C Street all the way down to oh gosh, and I would say all the way down to about the Oxnard area. And then when you go above Ventura Overhead, Emma Woods State Beach there, go from there, Ferrea, all the way up to La Conchita, Muscle Shoals. They've all been in that area. And once again, the best baits have been the exotics, and then anglers fishing that sand crab fly. When we see more sand crabs that are soft shells with eggs in them, they'll work really well too. And there's more sand crabs every day seen on the beaches in Oxnard and Ventura. They continue to grow, and very soon here, as this water warms back up again, you're going to start seeing those eggs in a large way. And then down in Hollywood Beach, it checked in with some really good fishing this week for barred surf perch, pile perch down there, and calico surf perch. It's like the California Grand Slam of surf perch. So good perch fishing down there. Once again, the anglers who had the best luck, there were some fish on grubs, but generally these fresh dead baits work really well. The mussel, the live sand crab, of course, lugworms, whether dried or not fresh, and then also the bloodworms. All of that has worked down in that Hollywood Beach area. And remember, that's where the record of the barred surf perch was set about 30 years ago by Fred Oakley, and then an equal sized one was caught up north of there, but Hollywood Beach remains to be one of the great perch fishing beaches all along Southern California. Didn't get any word this week out of Malibu. Malibu is quiet again. Hopefully some of you anglers in Malibu can give me some reports this upcoming week as to what's going there. I don't think the water turned over there as much also because of its angle towards south, so that has really helped. And then as we make our way down to the South Bay, really slowed down on the South Bay this week. It really got hammered by that wind and the water temperature change. There has been good yellowfin croaker fishing and perch fishing all along the Dockweiler, El Segundo zone in there. Anglers using, once again, mussel, lugworms, bloodworms, sand crabs, baits like that have worked really, really well down there. And then when we go down to the Redondo Pier, the Redondo Pier continues to have really good fishing for mackerel, greenback mackerel, tons of greenback mackerel down there. And that is the ultimate spot to pick up your bait for leopard shark fishing. And that's really what went on this week in the South Bay, was some excellent leopard shark fishing, with one of the anglers getting a hold of me and showing me a picture and telling me about a great fight on a big leopard shark he thought was the biggest halibut of his life, a 50-pound or right around the 50-pound range on a leopard shark. Of course, the state record is 42 pounds, caught at Bluff Cove, so that's a really big fish. And that was not the only one I heard of. There were many I heard up in Santa Barbara that were not quite as big, kind of in that 15 to 20 pound range, but down in the South Bay, a real handful of those really big 20 to 40 pound leopard sharks down there. And a lot of the anglers are fishing those with half a mackerel, about a 6/0 hook, heavy line like 40-pound cast or braid, casting that out at night and a high tide going to a low tide, and just keeping it free spool, allowing the surf to take that mackerel in and out. Because it's fairly heavy, you can get a good cast on that mackerel, and those big sharks will come in at night and feed there. These really big ones are almost always caught at night. Occasionally you'll get one during the day, but almost always they're feeding at night. So the South Bay a little bit slower in the last week or so. Hopefully, really hoping to get some reports over this weekend of some good Corbina fishing down in that Hermosa, Manhattan, even down in that Redondo and Torrance area. Really looking forward to that. And then as we make our way down to Orange County just broke loose this week. Really good fishing down in Orange County. The reason for that primarily was, I would think, was because Point Vicente and Palos Verdes sticking out into the ocean, it really blocked a lot of that northwest wind. It didn't turn over the water close to shore at all in Orange County. It didn't really change the water temperature. So fishing continues to be good down there. Starting up in that Seal Beach to Belmont Shore zone in there, really good halibut fishing. I know Seal Beach had a lot of yellowfin croaker and was a little bit slower on the halibut. There's quite a few sublegals caught there this week, and the anglers who are doing well there and up in Belmont Shore are using hard baits like Lecky Craft's Battlestar lures, but in addition to that are getting out and they're fishing in the harbor for smelt and then taking those smelt to the beach. And that really paid off at Belmont Shore this week, where one angler caught both a 22 and a 24-inch legal halibut in the same day using a Lucky Craft. So that zone continues to be good, and as those grunion come in, I mean, those grunion, they love Orange County. As those grunion come in up this week from today, that's even going to get better along that stretch there. And then as we make our way down the beach a little bit farther, Phil Friedman had a surf fishing festival last weekend, a great event for kids, for families. People had snacks down there, a little fishing event down there with a lot of bait provided to them, and also coffee and donuts. Had a great time. Anglers down there caught quite a few perch, several corvina, and one really big spotfin croaker. I think it was right around the 24-inch range, 22 to 24 inches in there. So really good fishing in that part of Orange County. That spotfin croaker was taken on a sand crab, pretty big sand crab, but also a lot of fish down there taken on live lugworms, live bloodworms, and ghost shrimp. That's really been the trick. So really those four in combination, lugworms, bloodworms, ghost shrimp, and sand crabs, particularly a little bit bigger, dime size or larger, and certainly those with eggs and those possibly losing their shell, all of those have worked as really good baits down there. So that's really been fantastic down there. And of course there's some walleye surf perch in that group too. And then lastly in Orange County, as we make our way down to Doheny Beach, right next to the Dana Harbor there, great fishing down there for halibut. It's a traditionally good place for halibut fishing down there. And one angler this week had some really good luck down there, right in that kind of between period on the grunion run, fishing a hard bait, catching a 24-inch legal halibut down there also. So really, we talked about Santa Barbara, there's halibut fishing. Didn't hear much in Ventura, but I did see one halibut come out of Ventura. And then as we make our way down to the South Bay, I know there's halibut there. And then now we know they're in Orange County, and of course they were biting down in San Diego this week. So really up and down the coast this week, I think the most available fish was the halibut, whether those were sub-legals or legal size halibut. And I really think that's going to pick up another week or so and get even better. So that's a really good sign. And then as we make our way down to San Diego, it was slower this week in San Diego. I've talked about this before. You know, I wonder if some of that has to do with the water temperature. It really slows down the production of sand crabs. They love cold water, which we would consider, you know, like 55 to maybe 64, 65, right in that range is where they're really prolific. And now that the water's 65 and been that way for a while down there, possibly that's slowing the sand crabs down. Don't really know. But when we make our way down to Carlsbad, it checked in with several leopard sharks, once again more along the coast there, and then also quite a few barred surf perch, and some like thornback sharks, rays, different rays, and those things were biting in that area. A little bit slow this week down in that Carlsbad zone, and really that's all the way from Ponto all the way up to the city of Carlsbad. It's generally good along there, a little slower this week, and I'm sure it's going to pick up this weekend with much better conditions. And then lastly, go down to Black's Beach, and it continues to have really good surf fishing along there. Didn't see any spotfin croaker there this week, but good leopard shark fishing, really good barred surf perch fishing, even some fish up to 14 inches, some of the bigger fish down there. So that was a really great sign. And then lots of yellowfin croaker. We haven't seen any of these real big ones, and sometimes, you know, they get 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pounds. There's some really big yellowfin croaker down there, and all the way up into Orange County. But we really haven't seen much of that this spring. We've seen all of those smaller fish, which is a good sign that there was a good spawn over the winter and last fall, and those fish are beginning to grow now. So that is always a really good sign. This upcoming week, the best days to fish are pretty much every day, except for that upcoming wind in the afternoons that we're going to see probably Monday through Wednesday or Thursday of next week. But otherwise, really great surf fishing with a small swell, good tidal change, and light winds. Particularly good Saturday, Sunday, and Monday coming up. I would really concentrate on those days down there. And I wanted to remind everybody as a last thing that certainly we have more t-shirts. We've got more on the way and some new designs, so keep your eye open for those. Maybe have more information on those next week. Dried lugworms, they're really the ultimate bait. They're being sold by shops from Crescent City on the border of Oregon all the way down to San Diego, and anglers are catching fish, stripers, halibut, perch. And then now a lot of people are using those in freshwater for red ear and bluegill and green bass in the lakes. All those are working. So check those out on our site, surffishtackle.com. And for more information about surf fishing, techniques, rigging, all that information, go to fishthesurf.com. So thank you everybody for watching this week, and until next week when I see you right here, thank you so much for watching, and good luck on the beach.